Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are putting on our competitive market strategist hats to look at one of the most ruthless, clinical, and frankly brilliant ecosystem defense maneuvers in modern tech history, Meta's direct cloning of Snapchat's core features. If you want to understand exactly how dominant incumbents maintain their defensive moats when faced with a structural threat, you're in the right place. This is an absolute masterclass. Here's our strategic playbook for today. We're going to cover the initial disappearing strategic threat, that massive $3 billion rejection, the clone counteroffensive, why distribution defeats innovation, and finally, what this means for the modern tech playbook. All right, part 1, the disappearing strategic threat. Think back to the social media landscape before 2011. The entire architecture was based on permanence, right? Every photo you uploaded stayed there forever. Everything was highly public, highly curated, and let's be honest, those embarrassing posts could definitely haunt you years later. But then, post-2011, Snapchat enters the scene and introduces ephemeral, disappearing media. Photos vanish after you view them. Messages just disappear. This gave younger demographics exactly what they were craving. Privacy, much lower stakes, and most importantly, it was just fun. It felt real rather than performative. So, teenagers start abandoning Facebook in droves for this new ephemeral platform. Now, if you're a market strategist at Meta, this represents a severe existential threat to your core demographic moat. Because in the attention economy, there is an absolute law. Wherever young users go, the advertising money inevitably follows. Snapchat wasn't just some quirky new app, it was a direct threat to Meta's future revenue pipeline and their overall customer acquisition costs. Which brings us to part 2. The $3 billion rejection. So how does an incumbent respond to a threat like that? Well, they try to buy it. In 2013, Mark Zuckerberg initiated a massive M&A play, offering an astonishing $3 billion for Snapchat. $3 billion! And this was a massive premium for a company generating essentially zero revenue at the time. For 99% of founders, this is the ultimate take the money, buy an island, and retire moment. But Zuckerberg wasn't buying current revenue. He was attempting to buy a defensive shield for his entire user ecosystem. But against literally all conventional market wisdom, Snapchat CEO Evan Spiegel rejected the billions. He actually said no. Investors and analysts at the time thought he was completely out of his mind. But Spiegel had looked at the engagement data. He firmly believed his structural disruption was so powerful that Snapchat could become a dominant standalone platform way bigger than that initial offer. For Zuckerberg, however, that rejection wasn't the end of the battle. It just changed the rules of engagement. Moving right into part 3, the clone counteroffensive. Up until that point, Facebook had a highly effective, standard competitive strategy. It was a simple 3-step playbook for ecosystem defense: acquire, integrate, and grow. Whenever a fast-growing rival popped up on the horizon, Facebook just bought them first. They did this flawlessly with Instagram and later on with WhatsApp. It neutralizes the threat, eliminates switching costs for users, and absorbs that innovation directly into their own user base. But what happens when step 1 fails? When Evan Spiegel said no, the M&A route was completely dead. So Facebook rapidly pivoted to their alternative option. If you literally cannot buy the innovator, you execute a clinical strategy of exact replication. Facebook carefully studied every single interaction, every feature, and every user habit on Snapchat, and they weaponized their massive engineering resources to build a clone. In August 2016, Facebook launched the result of that massive engineering push: Instagram Stories. And the feature parity was almost exact. The 24-hour disappearance rule? Copied. Vertical viewing format? Copied. The mechanics of quick posting, the overlays, the filters, the interactive stickers? All perfectly replicated. Now, at first, people laughed and called Instagram a shameless copycat. But you know what? The strategists at Meta didn't care about originality. They cared about retention. And that leads us to part 4, distribution defeats innovation. The core market mechanics of why the clone ultimately crushed the original innovator lie entirely in a concept called network effects. This is a phenomenon where a product gains exponential value as more people use it. Instagram already had hundreds of millions of users highly connected to one another. When they dropped the Stories feature right at the very top of the Instagram feed, they leveraged that massive scale. Suddenly, users had absolutely no incentive to face the friction of opening a second app like Snapchat, when all their friends, family, and favorite brands were already posting disappearing stories right there on Instagram. To their credit, Snapchat fought back the only way they knew how:
by pushing the envelope further. They kept innovating. They launched physical hardware with spectacles, they pioneered incredible augmented reality filters, they rolled out premium features. You could easily argue they were the far more innovative product team. But in a brutal market reality, Instagram's sheer distribution advantage was simply too powerful of a structural moat to overcome.
This is such a harsh lesson for any startup or market strategist. Convenience beat originality. Having the best or even the first idea just isn't enough to win the market when an incumbent can offer the exact same convenience to billions of existing users who are already waiting inside their walled garden. By simply removing the friction of downloading and opening a new app, Meta entirely neutralized Snapchat's unique value proposition. Finally, let's look at part 5, the modern tech playbook. Meta's cloning of Snapchat wasn't just an isolated, aggressive event. It actually became the systemic blueprint for modern platform competition. The precedent was set. Dominant incumbents will simply absorb successful features from emerging threats. Look at the landscape today. The explosive rise of TikTok directly inspired Instagram to launch Reels and Google to launch YouTube Shorts. We've even seen short-form vertical videos added to professional networks like LinkedIn. Almost every major platform now actively copies winning ideas just to defend their turf. And that brings us to the ultimate law of the modern tech strategist. Buy the rival or copy the feature. Either way, you must protect your ecosystem at all costs. In the technology business, user attention is the most valuable currency on Earth. It dictates advertising dollars, stock prices, and market dominance. Whoever keeps those users locked within their ecosystem, regardless of who originally invented the feature keeping them there, usually wins the war. But, this leaves us with a critical, long-term, strategic question regarding the health of the market itself. If giant, well-capitalized tech companies can simply copy every successful startup feature instantly, will future entrepreneurs still be willing to take massive risks? Will venture capitalists even fund consumer social apps knowing Meta or Google can just clone them in a few months? Or will overall market innovation inevitably slow down under the weight of this copycat culture? I'll leave you with this final, provocative thought to consider today. Look at this dynamic objectively. Was Instagram Stories simply an example of smart, aggressive competition driving the market forward? Or was it an unfair copy that highlights the dangerous market dominance of a few massive tech giants? The line between genius ecosystem defense and anti-competitive behavior is incredibly thin. Keep the strategic framework in mind the next time you see a familiar feature pop up in your favorite app. Thanks for diving into the playbook with me on this explainer today, and keep questioning the strategy behind the screen.